Hey, what's going on? Jeff Ratcliffe here. It's fantasy draft season and everybody's talking about the rookies. It's an exciting class. And I want to break down the quarterbacks. Now, before I get into them, remember, we're not going to get Deshaun Watson every year. It is rare for quarterbacks to go out in their rookie year and put up big fantasy numbers. But this year, we saw all of those quarterbacks getting drafted in the first round. So we definitely need to know these names because we are going to see these guys under center at some point, some of them earlier than others in 2018. So let's start at the top with the Heisman Trophy winner, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, the #1 overall pick in the draft. Of course, that's Baker Mayfield. And we grade players at Pro Football Focus. Baker was straight up dominant in PFF grades over the last 2 years, the #1 quarterback. So this guy is the truth. Excellent on deep balls. Completed 38 of 67 last year for 1,452 yards and 13 scores. Deep balls for fantasy purposes are good things. Those are balls that travel over 20 yards in the air, and that means big play upside. We love those long touchdowns, especially if you're in those leagues that get bonuses for 40-yard plus touchdowns, 50-yard plus touchdowns. That's good for Baker in the long term. Very good under pressure, excelled in the eye, calm in the eye of the storm. So I don't think he's going to have a tough transition in terms of the NFL pass rush. Now, of course, the big knock on him is the obvious. It's his size. I stood next to this guy. I can tell you he's 6'1.5", right? Every bit of 6'1.5", but that's small for an NFL quarterback. But I'm not worried about it. We've seen undersized quarterbacks, quote-unquote undersized guys succeed in the past. Drew Brees, Russell Wilson in recent history, so not a huge deal. Probably the biggest barrier for him, at least in the short term, is Tyrod Taylor is there in Cleveland. So Tyrod's going to be under center in week 1. He'll be the initial starter. And it's really, at least in the short term, Tyrod's job to lose. So when do we see Baker? I don't know, but I do think we see him in 2018, so keep an eye on him. Let's go next to Sam Darnold, who goes to the New York Jets. He looks the part. He definitely looks more like an NFL quarterback, at least from a size standpoint, than Baker Mayfield, 6'4", 220, so prototype when you think of an NFL quarterback. Now, some say he regressed a little bit last year. I don't know if that's necessarily fair because there was a little stretch of the season where, yes, he did struggle, but for the rest of the season, he was fine. So I'm not too worried about that. Another guy who, calm in the eye of the storm, actually had an adjusted completion percentage of 79% against the blitz. So he could handle the blitz. That was tops among all signal callers in this year's draft class. So again, goes to the Jets. Another situation where there is a veteran in place. Josh McCown is there. So when does Darnold start? That we don't necessarily know. I think the bigger concern is the surrounding cast with the Jets. They have some decent running back talent. Isaiah Crowell came in, Elijah McGuire, Bilal Powell there. But at wide receiver, they really don't have a true #1. I love Robbie Anderson, fellow Temple University alum Robbie Anderson. But he's not best suited to being the #1 option there on an NFL team. He's more of a field stretcher, which is not a knock on him. They just need more surrounding talent there for Sam Darnold for the long term. Next up, let's talk about Josh Rosen. Goes to Arizona. Maybe the most polished out of this year's quarterbacks. In other words, the most ready to start on day 1. And we'll get to that in a second, but why do I say that? Where he excels is in the short and intermediate areas of the field. Last year was one of the best in that regard at the college level. And when you think about it, where are most of your passes going? Short and intermediate areas of the field. So that's a plus. Very aggressive, though. Very aggressive to a fault. Last year, he ranked just 24th out of 38 draft eligibles in avoiding turnover-worthy throws. That's one of the great stats that we track here at Pro Football Focus. So he goes to Arizona. There is talent in Arizona, unlike what we see with the Jets. Of course, he has David Johnson, who is arguably the best receiving running back in the NFL. Larry Fitzgerald is still there, at least for now, and they draft Christian Kirk. They have some other receivers there, Bryce Butler, J.J. Nelson. So it's a nice group. Ricky Seals-Jones at tight end. But Sam Bradford is there. And, okay, last year injured, didn't play out the season, but was coming off a great year for Bradford, maybe a career year in 2016, completed over 70% of his passes. So is Bradford under center? Is he healthy? When do we see Rosen? Because ultimately, when these guys, it's not 15 years ago. When these guys are drafted in the first round, they're going to get on the field. So Josh Rosen behind Bradford, at least for now. Let's go to another Josh Allen, who goes to the Buffalo Bills. Probably it's either him or the next guy are the biggest question marks in this year's class among the top prospects. But a high ceiling with Josh Allen, a low floor. His rise when he goes to Wyoming from the community college level was pretty rapid. It was really impressive to see. But the big concern that we have about Allen is the accuracy issues. Completed just 56.2% of his passes. That's a concern because typically we don't see that number improve dramatically at the pro level. But he can make the extraordinary look ordinary. He makes it look easy. Incredible throws that ordinary human beings cannot make. So that's a plus there. The Buffalo quarterback situation is a little bit different. We don't really have an established veteran. They go out, they get A.J. McCarron, but they gave him backup money. They have Nathan Peterman in-house, so you basically have two backups there, but you have an unpolished, raw quarterback who you drafted in the first round. We don't know who's going to be under center there, but there is a lot of upside with Josh Allen. There's a lot of downside too. Finally, Lamar Jackson. Not the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, but a Heisman Trophy winner. We know what he's able to do. He's an elite running quarterback. He's a special athlete. He brings to the field a dual threat ability that we really haven't seen maybe since Michael Vick, because he is able to throw the ball. I think in some ways Lamar Jackson is a little bit underrated as a passer. He improved his completion percentage from 56 to 59% over the last 2 years. So you have those elements, and of course the athleticism is really off the charts. We saw that in his Heisman Trophy winning season. We saw it last year as well. Now, of course, another established veteran, an incumbent starter, in fact, in Joe Flacco. What do the Ravens think of Flacco? When do we ultimately see Lamar Jackson? I don't think we see him this year, but then again, it is the NFL and anything can happen. But just know, out of these five, the guy with the highest long-term fantasy ceiling is Lamar Jackson because of the dual threat ability. Think about it. Cam Newton, do we regard him as the best passer out there? No, not really. Definitely not, right? He's not up in the conversation with Aaron Rodgers, with Tom Brady. He's not. But year in and year out, you know what Cam Newton does? He scores fantasy points. So keep that in mind with Lamar Jackson. Two other names just to keep in the back of your head for fantasy purposes, for deep fantasy purposes. Mason Rudolph goes to Pittsburgh. Maybe he's the long-term replacement there for Big Ben. And of course, Kyle Lauletta goes to the Giants. An interesting name, but of course, and Eli Manning coming to the end of his run in the NFL. He's been in the league for a very long time. So is Lauletta the long-term replacement? We don't know the answer to that, but we have to keep an eye on him as well. Who do you like out of this group? Give us a comment below. And of course, subscribe to the channel for more fantasy videos. And go check us out for all your fantasy needs at ProFootballFocus.com.